In this video, we're going to look at some of the most shockingly small plane crashes in the world. Number 1. Rockwell 1121A Jet Commander, Oak Grove, Pennsylvania, 1988. It was a cold November morning in 1988 when the Rockwell 1121 Jet Commander took off from Pittsburgh en route to Latrobe. On board were 3 crew members, including the captain with over 16,000 flying hours, and the co-pilot, who had recently lost his driver's license for DUI. They were on a calibration flight, checking flight inspection equipment when they encountered moderate icing conditions. The ice detection system had been intermittently inoperative, and the crew noted the ice accretion, but their attention was diverted as they entered a holding pattern. As they circled in the sky, the ice continued to build up on the wings, and the pilots activated the surface de-ice system. The ice broke loose and entered the engine intakes, causing both engines to flame out. During the emergency descent, the crew tried to restart the engines, but neither would sustain with power. With no other options left, they requested vectors to a more distant airport. The co-pilot had limited training in flight inspection, and both pilots had personal stresses that may have influenced their performance. The captain had decided to retire that day, and the co-pilot had been working in flight operations only 3 days in the last 8 weeks. It was later revealed that both the pilots were seen drinking the previous night, and the captain's contaminated thoracic blood revealed 0.05% alcohol. The co-pilot had trace alcohol in his urine only. As the jet commander descended rapidly towards the ground, the pilots could see the trees getting closer and closer. They tried to avoid them, but it was too late. The aircraft collided with several trees before crashing into a valley, killing all 3 crew members on board. The investigation into the crash revealed that the engines had suffered from compressor foreign object damage consistent with ice ingestion. It was also found that the crew had delayed removing the ice from the aircraft, and the pilot in command had been inattentive, failing to observe the rapid accretion of ice on the airplane due to his attention being diverted. The crash of the Rockwell 1121 Jet Commander was a tragic reminder of the dangers of flying in icing conditions and the importance of being vigilant and attentive as a pilot. It was also a cautionary tale about the dangers of personal stress and alcohol consumption affecting a pilot's performance. Number 2. Cessna, Los Banos, California, 1988. It was a beautiful day for a test flight, or so the crew of the G650 thought. Visual meteorological conditions prevailed as they prepared for a one-engine inoperative takeoff from Roswell International Air Center. The crew was confident in their abilities and the capabilities of the aircraft. They were wrong. The takeoff started smoothly enough, but as they lifted off the ground, something went terribly wrong. The right outboard wing stalled, producing a rolling moment that the crew could not control. The aircraft began to tilt to the right, and the crew desperately tried to correct the roll, but it was too late. The right wingtip hit the runway, and the G650 veered off the runway to the right. The crew watched in horror as the airplane impacted a concrete structure and an airport weather station. The sound of metal crunching and glass shattering filled the cockpit as the plane came to a stop. The crew was alive, but barely. The impact had caused extensive structural damage, and a post-crash fire broke out, consuming the fuselage and cabin interior. The crew was trapped, unable to escape the inferno. They knew that their fate was sealed. As the flames grew hotter and the smoke thicker, the crew was overcome with fear and regret. They had trusted in Gulfstream's ability to properly develop and validate takeoff speeds for the flight tests, but they'd been let down. They'd pushed too hard to achieve V2 speeds that were erroneously low, and now they were paying the ultimate price. The crew thought back to Gulfstream's inadequate investigation of previous G650 uncommanded roll events, which indicated that the company's estimated stall angle of attack while the airplane was in ground effect was too high. They knew that they should have spoken up, should have pushed back against the company's aggressive program schedule, but they had not. In the end, it was Gulfstream's failure to effectively manage the G650 flight test program that led to their deaths. They had pursued an aggressive schedule without ensuring that the roles and responsibilities of team members had been appropriately defined and implemented. Engineering processes had received sufficient technical planning and oversight, potential hazards had been fully identified, and appropriate risk controls had been implemented and were functioning as intended. As the fire consumed them, the crew realized that they'd been pawns in Gulfstream's game, sacrificed in the pursuit of profit and prestige. They died knowing that they could have done more, should have done more, but it was too late. The G650 flight test program had claimed its latest victims, and it would not be the last. Number 3. Cessna 310 crashed into house, Compton, California, 2008. Tragedy struck a quiet residential neighborhood just outside of Los Angeles on Saturday when a twin-engine Cessna 310 crashed into 2 homes, leaving a trail of destruction and despair. The incident occurred around 4 p.m. in the afternoon, causing panic and chaos among the residents as they tried to come to terms with what had just happened. Eyewitnesses reported seeing the plane spiraling out of control as it approached the Compton/Woodley Airport just a block away. The plane's fuselage crashed through the roof of one house, and the left wing of the plane lodged into the second house, sending debris flying in all directions. In the aftermath of the crash, emergency services rushed to the scene, trying to assess the extent of the damage and attended those who were injured. At least 4 people were badly injured in the incident, but their conditions were not immediately available. The impact of the crash was devastating, not just for those who were injured, but also for those families who lost their homes in the accident. The 2 houses were left in ruins, with debris scattered all over the street. For the families who lived in the homes, the crash was a nightmare that they never thought they would experience. One of the homeowners who was trapped in her home after the plane crashed said that she thought she was going to die. She described how the impact of the crash shook her entire house and how she was pinned down under the rubble. As the emergency services worked to free her, she could hear the cries of her neighbors who had also been injured in the accident. The scene was one of chaos and confusion as residents tried to come to terms with what had just happened. Number 4. Hawker Beechcraft 125-800A East Coast Jets crash, Owatonna, Minnesota, 2008. On a fateful day in July 2008, East Coast Jet Flight 81 was scheduled to land at Owatonna Degner Regional Airport in Minnesota. The passengers on board were 6 construction workers who were involved in the construction of Atlantic City's tallest building, the Revel Casino. They were accompanied by the flight crew comprising of Captain Clark John Kiefer and First Officer Daniel D'Ambrosio. Little did anyone know that this flight would not end as planned, and all 8 souls on board would lose their lives. The flight took off from Atlantic City International Airport and made its way towards Owatonna. However, during the landing approach, the aircraft touched down but ran out of runway, forcing the crew to make a go-around attempt. As the aircraft attempted to take off again, it overran the end of the runway and crashed into a cornfield. The right wing of the plane collided with the approach lighting system, causing the aircraft to bank hard to the right until it was upside down before finally crashing. The tragic event shook the entire aviation industry, and the National Transportation Safety Board launched an investigation into the crash. The NTSB investigators used the cockpit voice recorder and eyewitness accounts to determine the cause of the accident. The investigators found that the pilot's lack of coordination and cockpit discipline contributed to the accident. The crew failed to apply full brakes and moved the air brake handle to the open position, which only partially extended the air brakes. They should have first selected flaps 45 degrees and then the proper air brake dump position, which would have safely brought the aircraft to a stop even after it overran the runway. The NTSB cited the pilot's error in attempting a go-around as the primary cause of the accident. They concluded the aircraft would have come to rest within the runway safety margins if the pilots had not attempted a go-around. The aftermath of the crash was devastating for the families of the passengers on board. Wrongful death actions were filed, and the families settled around the same time as the NTSB's report. The Revel Casino was considered a memorial to the passengers of the ill-fated flight. The tragedy of East Coast Jets Flight 81 is a reminder of the importance of safety in aviation. It is also a tragic story of construction workers who had flown to Minnesota to meet the glass-walled project's glass manufacturer. They were eager to see the construction of the Revel Casino through to completion, but their lives were cut short. The dark story of East Coast Jets Flight 81 highlights the risks involved in aviation and the importance of following proper procedures to ensure the safety of all passengers and crew. It's a tragic reminder of the fragility of human life and the need for continued efforts to improve aviation safety. And that's a wrap for this episode. We'll be back with more.